What do you? I guess spoilers a little bit now. We'll put a line in the
Yeah.
sand because I want to talk about this. So spoilers for Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma. There's a long sequence in this movie
Mm-hmm.
that is a recreation of the original Camp Miasma
Mm-hmm.
film. What did you think of that
I liked
sequence?
it. I thought
Okay.
it was such an interesting, like, we're sitting here with the characters watching the movie, and I thought the recreation, like, I've thought about this going back to I Saw the TV Glow, Jane's recreation of a sort of ABC Family-esque, like, Buffy show. I was like, oh, this is so good. Like, it doesn't feel artificial. And I feel like there's maybe a little bit more artificiality here, but in a way that's like calibrated and intentional because it is that characters are like soon about to enter into that and are looking for this thing. Whereas
Mm,
in I Saw the TV Glow, I don't know if they quite made that exact same leap. It was slightly more metaphorical. This is metaphor, but it is also like, we're going to get in it now. Like, we're going to be in the movie now. And so I think that sequence is very specific, is very good, captures like the type of slasher film really well, still has its tongue in cheek, but then settles down into something sincere where these slightly, I don't want to say trashy, but sort of sequences that are like maybe exploitative, maybe a little manipulative, not like high art, can still be meaningful to someone. And seeing that reflected back to them, and the scene of them sitting in the theater together echoes the scene that we see near the end, which is in the trailer, of the younger version of her having a similar experience of watching it and the impact it had on her. I could see it taking people out of the film because it literally is like, oh, we're going to sit down with the characters and they're going to watch the film and we're going to watch them watch the film and watch it with them.
it's
But I
very
liked it.
audacious.
I liked
Yeah,
it.
I liked it. One of the interesting critiques again that my friend brought up earlier is about kind of how, like, in their opinion, they don't really feel like the movie understands slasher films, which is
Mm,
interesting, especially as it relates to the final girl and how it's not about sexual confusion so much as it is about the final girl in these movies is sexual repression. Like, they want to have
mm.
sex, everyone else around them is having sex. Why aren't they having sex? Now, I'm not going to debate the merits of that point, but I do think that this movie plays fast and loose with its structure, with its reality, with what could really be happening, with what isn't. And one thing that I don't know if it's a critique of, but something I've just noticed is the slasher stuff in the movie doesn't look like a slasher
Mm.
movie. And that's just something I'm observing as someone who's, was raised on all those movies and
It's a
watched
heightened
them growing up.
version of it in a way.
Yeah, it just doesn't have any of the like traditional. And look, this is maybe I'm being, a bit minute, and it's mostly just an observation that, like, it doesn't have the traditional cuts and edits that you might see in one of those movies. And I wonder if that does it a little bit of a disservice, or conversely, does the choice to not film it in that way give it a closer vibe to, let's say, Twin Peaks
Mm.
or one of these more kind of like abstract horror movies, because obviously Jane is a David Lynch disciple, to say the
Hmm.
least.
But I
But
think also doing their own thing with it.
yeah,
Like, I would say it's similar to Twin Peaks, but much less, for lack of a better word, silly as like
hmm
David Lynch could sometimes be. Like, there are some parts of Lynch's stuff where you're like, what are we doing? In this, like, the silliness fears. I mean, I think they're both sincere filmmakers,
hmm
but I feel like the sincerity throughout all of this is so closely tied to everything, to where when you're talking about it doesn't have the same cuts, it's because it's like we're trying to pay attention to the character that maybe the conventional slasher wouldn't have. That
you
we're
mean the slasher themselves?
the slasher themselves, for one, like the front facing look in that unbroken scene. Yes,
hmm
of course, no slasher film does that, because
Yeah.
this is about finding a kinship, a connection with the killer in a sense. And I love that sequence so much, but I also think it's
Mm.
the little
Interesting.
moments of the quote unquote final girl where she's no longer just sort of this like small part off to the side. a conquest or like someone to eventually survive at the end. It's like, oh, we're seeing a metatextual, like, what was her experience like as an actress, not just as character in thing. What was it like for her making that movie and then now watching it back? Like, it calls attention to those things. And I don't even think that all slasher films are somehow reductive towards their characters. Like, I think there are really interesting slasher films that do maybe do something subversive or interesting that people have reclaimed. But I would also say there are many that don't as well. And I think this attempts to complicate that.
Can I
But
ask you?
it's up for conversation too.
Totally. Well, with that in mind, and I think maybe we'll talk about this in a little. We'll talk more about the Twin Peaks thing in a few minutes. But
Yeah.
um, so I in my whole life have kind of felt like something being meta somehow
Mm.
makes it smarter, and I know that it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's like one of those things where I'm attracted to that. I'm sort of attracted to the thing that's commenting. I don't know if I'm irony poisoned or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But sometimes these days I'm a little bit like, is there anything more to this than it just being meta? Not this movie necessarily in particular, but in general. Like, where
Yeah.
are we on the state of the meta picture? And also, along with that, I think it's sort of worth asking the question, like, this film is partially about the over intellectualization of horror films. You know, there's a kind of a dialogue between Gillian Anderson's Billy character and Hannah Einbender's Chris character at the beginning of the film, where Hannah Einbender's like, "Oh, this movie is about desire and these feelings and kind of like awakening," and Gillian Anderson and her like perfect. Again, I saw her play Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire years ago, and this is like essentially a sequel to Performance to that. But she talks about how like, no, Camp Miasma was about flesh and fluid.
Yeah.
And so, like, what is the state of the like meta movie?
I think
right
it
now?
requires some degree of self-awareness and sort of skewering itself just as it comments on other things. And this might be a weird point of comparison, but did you ever see The Souvenir, the Joanna Hogg film?
You know, I actually haven't, which is crazy because like that kind of came around at the time my first child was born, so I think I was just not plugged in at the same extent. But I do. I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna get that from.
You
Scarecrow
should see
maybe
that,
today.
and then also The Souvenir Part 2. And there are moments in that about making a film about a film and like early creatives and certain characters that kind of like poke fun at itself. That it's not just like so up in the air above it that it's to say, I know everything or like I understand this. It's like, oh, I'm down in here with it. Like that's why, as a person who really likes horror, this is not a movie that's talking down to horror or like trying to, and I hate to use this phrase, like we're gonna elevate the horror film. It's like, I love horror films and I hate horror films and I have complicated feelings about horror films. Let's explore that. Let's like wrestle with that, but not be detached from it. So I would say when it's the state of the meta film, the biggest problem could be that you come away feeling like, oh, this is holding everything at a distance. To me, this brings it in for an embrace. That was what I kind of wrote as a part of my Seattle Times review, is it holds it really close. And that can be joyous and fun, but also complicated and slightly painful to try and like figure things out as a person who was impacted by maybe these fun but silly slasher horror movies. And so I think it works. I've thought about, I don't know, what was the last like big meta horror film that really did it well?
Backrooms horror film?
You could say that that's a meta horror film, but I think that's just commenting on things in modern sort of young people's perspective and a little bit about AI. I don't know. You could say it's a tough thing to do, like this, the what is it? The scary movies that came out this year.
Well, there was one this year. There's one this year that bombed. I think.
I
don't think anyone saw it. Rather than go down that road, let me ask you: Is this kind of the like? It won't be, but could this be construed as like the final say on the elevation of horror movies? Because like it is a horror movie, but you also have like a very celebrated actress. You have an up and coming kind of like, or like young millennial hipster star who seems to lean into playing the worst aspects of millennialism. Like, I'm very excited to see some of the more conservative takes on this movies. We were texting about Armand White's review of this movie is like I'm already excited to read how insane that's probably gonna be, even though he's a good writer. Whose opinions I generally do not agree with. Just think it's probably worth mentioning here. But like, is this kind of like this, to me at least, is an interesting moment in the what are we thinking about horror movies? Even though this is less of a horror movie and like kind of more of a camp sexy kind of
I think its connection to horror has to do with iconography, with commenting on the genre, with reflecting on one's relationship to the genre. To me, that still makes it of the genre, but it's not the same as the thing it's commenting on. And I don't think it's like trying to be quote unquote elevated horror movies, because horror movies have always been about real stuff, about deeper ideas. This is then trying to cut into that a little bit and see what comes bursting out. And that's what excites me about it and makes me excited that more people are going to see it and love it or hate it or be mixed about it or argue about it and have discussions about it. I don't know. I have only gained a greater appreciation over time for it, but I also think that it is the beginning of a conversation, not the end of one, both in terms of audiences, but also in terms of like what is going to happen in cinema, in horror cinema, because horror's always going to be a kind of robust part of the movie-going experience.
Maybe the most robust one we have. Well, I think we should leave it there and move on to some other things.